You are now tuned in to the Project 365 experience.
Welcome back, guys, to the Project 365 podcast. I am your host, Coach O, and today another great episode. We got the opportunity to just keep up with some prospects during Summer League, and who else better than to bring on board to review these prospects than my good friend Josué Sédrjo from On Point Scouting. Josué, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Excited to talk about all these different players that we've identified, we've watched. Summer League can sometimes be a tough watch, but there are so many good moments that lets us kind of a snippet of the future of a lot of these young guys. So it's always, as basketball lovers, it's always a good watch.
Absolutely. It's an amazing time for us because you feel like Summer League is the beginning of the future for a lot of these franchises. For a lot of people, it's the first time that they get to see top prospects touch an NBA floor, right? But we want to prelude this by talking about Summer League and just explaining to people who may not be familiar with the process that what we see in Summer League, you kind of need to take it with a grain of salt because you're not going to get the full picture based off Summer League. And I'm going to give you the floor to start this off because, you and I, we were talking back and forth, and you mentioned to me that the idea for Summer League is just like, I just want to know if you can play. That's the first thing. That's going to be the baseline, right? All the bonus will come otherwise, but I want to give you the opportunity to just explain a little bit more what you meant by that.
An NBA game is a much more obvious and simple environment to evaluate a young player's performance, right? Yes, sometimes a young player will be on the road, or sometimes they'll have a very limited amount of minutes, or it'll be a very tough matchup, but at the very least, it's at the NBA level. It's an NBA game, you're measuring that. In Summer League, there are so many different agendas conflicting very often within the same team, within the context of a singular team, let alone comparing to all other 30 teams, that it makes for a very chaotic environment. So we're looking at, there are veterans who are either on their last legs or trying to get back in the league. There are guys from Europe or China or South America who are pros, who've been pros for a long time, who this is their one shot to make an impact. And a lot of time those guys are shot creators, so they might get shot happy. You have second-year guys or third-year NBA players who are looking to expand their role or establish themselves as NBA players, and the team says, okay, you're the primary option. We're going to give you the ball, and everything is going to run through you. And then for the rookie coming in, that's a very difficult environment when you have all this stuff going on. So what that means is you need to, as an evaluator, you have to simplify your assignment as much as possible. And because that environment is so chaotic, it leads to a lot more, let's say, random good performances than random bad performances. So as a young player, it's more indicative if you really, really, really struggle to replicate your role, replicate your game, find your comfort, have any kind of impact. Like, that is very, very significant, rather than if you have a good game. Because a good game in a chaotic environment like this is not replicable to the NBA level. Like, it's going to be different. It's not as chaotic. But if you are really bad in a chaotic environment, then how are you going to be able to excel in a structured environment with higher quality talent? And that's why my line has always been, tell me who struggles dramatically or drastically. Like, that is much more indicative for me than somebody who excels, let's say, in a way that you didn't think would be sustainable. Now, we're jumping ahead a little bit. If a young player comes in and he's already, like, right away he's good and amazing, it's much more of a checkbox than it is future prediction of performance. You want to check that box. You want to make sure that on your checklist of items in your pro career, okay, I was good in Summer League. That's a good check to have. But it's not necessarily predictive of performance.
Mm-hmm. And to your point, that's why I learned this because of you. Like, that's also why, like, after a certain amount of games, like, they shut certain players down.
That's right. I mean, to bring people behind the scenes a little bit, I mentioned the second, third year players, NBA players are going to have the priority from an NBA team development standpoint. A lot of times, those guys are going to play 1 or 2 games because it's an extension of off-season training. Really, it's not You're not going to summer league for summer league. You're going to summer league as part of this off-season program, right? Like we've been working since April, since the season ended. Now we're throwing you back into a semi-competitive environment. Let's see how you apply this, and then we continue with off-season training all the way until NBA training camp. For a rookie coming in, it depends. For some teams, this is a prominent, if it's a lottery pick, a top 5 pick, like if it's a prominent player that we're going to feature a lot, right, we're gonna feed him as many opportunities as we can, and then depending how he performs, he either plays all 5 games in Vegas, maybe he plays just one, maybe he plays a few in the different classics, depending on his performance. And then for the veterans that we're looking to potentially fill the back of a roster, our G League roster, maybe we're looking at them as an opportunity for in the mid-season, maybe a 2-way contract. Then, like, the end of Summer League is much more conducive for us to evaluate their performance. So that's why a lot of times you're going to see players shut down early on in Summer League, depending on performance. Obviously, injuries, goes without saying. But that's kind of like the process of evaluation from an NBA team standpoint, right? You're looking at your young players returning, then your rookies, then your back end of the roster, more veteran types players.
Yeah, I love the process of Summer League. But to piggyback on it, I think, like we said, like based on those performances, you mentioned a lot of those factors, but other factors that for next year that our listeners can potentially focus on. It's just that there's going to be a lot of players, like you mentioned, that are looking to make that next step. So a lot of times, like the game it doesn't flow the way that it should, because I guess to a certain point, you're almost like you're playing with everybody on your team that is looking for the next opportunity, right? So maybe the extra pass is not there. Maybe I don't hold my spacing as much because I got pressure on having to have a good game in this kind of situation, right? And again, we know how competitive NBA players are, and now you got players that are coming from overseas. You got players that just left for college. It's a whole mix of a whole bunch of different players. The coaches have limited amount of time to try to get everybody on that same page. So that's why sometimes you'll see a lot of things where the spacing is not as good. You'll see maybe players will make reads that they'll assume that certain players have to be in certain places, and then that leads to bad turnovers. One thing that I noticed this is I really started paying attention to it, and it's there was a lot of missed layups at the rim, right? And there was a lot of turnovers that I found were very eye-popping, where it's if you had and you weren't on a team that you had built chemistry with, those numbers, those turnovers probably wouldn't happen. Those missed layups probably don't happen, right? You could feel players second-guessing themselves. But I think for us, for the sake of this conversation and us reviewing Summer League, I think what we're going to be looking for, and if there's anything else, feel free to jump in. I think what we're going to be looking at is decision-making. We're looking at the skill set of certain players to see if that translates, right? They get the opportunity to be on an NBA floor for the first time. How does it translate? And also, for the sake of this conversation, I'm gonna call it kind of based on the competition. There's certain players, they play at a different speed than everybody else. You could tell, right? And so, I think those are kind of the main factors. But I don't know, is there anything that you wanted to hit on?
No, I think you sum it up pretty well. For the young players returning, you're looking for them to confirm to you, yes, I'm an NBA player. Whatever your role is, big, wing, guard, I'm an NBA player, and it should be clear. At the very least, as a team, as a team personnel, you're hoping that the guy on your team, it's clear to everybody's eye, okay, this guy's an NBA player. Now let's figure out how he fits in our rotation. Now, for the young draft pick, this year's draft pick, first round pick, second round pick, it's an assessment tool. Now, if you're hoping for this guy to be a part of your rotation, you're hoping that he walks in and he's a clear NBA player. But if he's more of a developmental project, or he's a good young player but we're not sure where he fits in the rotation, it's much more of an evaluation tool rather than anything else. And then finally, I think the what you're looking for is not so much as a team evaluator, member of team personnel, it's not looking at the guys on your team, it's looking at the guys on the other team that may or may not be signed to see if there's an opportunity. For example, Bryce McGowan was playing with the Charlotte Hornets, on the Charlotte Hornets Summer League team, And he played so well that the Blazers saw his performance and snapped him up on the two-way, and he switched teams midway through Summer League. Like, that's an example of teams paying attention to other teams just as much as their team to see are there other young players who, if we give them an opportunity, can bring something to the table that we're interested in.
So we're going to dive into our prospects. For the sake of this conversation, we wanted to break it down to different sections for us to be able to analyze the different prospects. So the first three prospects that we have are going to be prospects that we're going to do a deep dive on. These are prospects that we think through Summer League, there's a big emphasis that's going to be put on these players' development and have shown us certain things that we want to talk about. Afterwards, we're going to go into our rapid fire question. We're going to go into this one will probably be a mix of first year rookies and then second year players. When we get to that point, we'll definitely highlight those. And at the end, we're going to have our honorable mention. There's going to be players that gave us a little something to look forward to just based on their performances. So with our first deep dive, Josué, take it away. Who do we like?
So we'll start with Alexandre Sarr, drafted obviously second overall by the Washington Wizards. I don't think it's a secret that he struggled quite a bit, highlighted by one game where he shot 0 for 15 from the field. Unfortunately, didn't make a field goal. Had quite a tough time. I'll start by we'll focus on Summer League, Vegas Summer League for his stat line. So he averaged 5.5 points, along with 7.8 rebounds and 3.3 assists, paired with 2.3 turnovers per game in 4 games. He played about 30 minutes a game. He did have 2.5 blocks, as well as almost 1 steal per game. Where it really jumps off the page, unfortunately, is that he shot 19% from the field on 12 attempts a game, 12% from 3 on 4 attempts a game, and 50% from the line on 1 attempt a game. So a total of 4 free throws. So that part, not as representative a sample. So I think if you start by just looking at the stat line, obviously it jumps off to you and in a very, very concerning way. But I think the best way to provide a comprehensive analysis of his performance is to start with the fact that he was always the profile, especially the offensive profile of a player that was going to explore all avenues and possibilities of effectiveness. Because his three-point shot is not refined, because he is more on the slight side from a physical build standpoint, and because he is not necessarily he's a good roller, vertical spacing wise, but he's not a perfect roller. For him to contribute offensively efficiently was always going to be a work in progress. And I think what Summer League highlighted was that independent of a good environment, like in a chaotic environment, he is not ready to thrive. So from a Washington Wizards standpoint, I think the way the roster is built right now, it leads me to think, how do they make sure they don't lose him in the crowd? How do they still make sure that his development is, I wouldn't say prioritized, but taken care of? Because there's a lot of noise in the front court. So those are the first thoughts that came to me. What did you think?
Alex Sarr was an interesting one because I struggled to kind of figure out what kind of shot profile he was going to have going into, what shot profile he's going to have for himself. And for the listeners, when I say shot profile, it's like you could sense that he's trying to, you use the word, I liked it a lot, explore. Like, I think he himself was kind of exploring on, am I going to be more of a short roll kind of guy? Am I going to be more of a mid post? Are they going to run the offense through me? Like, you kind of like feel it, but I think like Washington kind of gives him the opportunity to, explore more on these different avenues, right? Because like you said, like the roster, it's a blessing and a curse because the roster doesn't have that much structure. But for a young player, if you're not surrounded with the proper people and the proper structure, it can be tough to find your way in this league.
No, absolutely. So there's kind of two things going on here, right? So on one hand, he had, in order to maintain his confidence, and if we're looking forward to the NBA season, to maintain his confidence, he's got to find an avenue or a runway for him to find any kind of efficiency offensively. Right now, his current skill set is he's at his best when he's rolling to the rim with space, or like maybe short roll, but with the intention to score, right? Because he's so quick. He's got really quick feet. He's really, his lower body is very flexible and agile. He's able to kind of go both directions in terms of, I don't know about dribbling, but like escapability to the rim, like long strides, going left, going right. Like his body is mobile and flexible, athletic enough to do that. But if that role is the role of a rolling center, right? Like it's kind of a dive 5 role. But with his physical build, he's probably best defending 4s. So essentially, for him to be comfortable on offense, he has to be beside a shooting center. There's not that many of those guys in the league, period, let alone on the Washington Wizards. I mean, they just signed Jonas Valanciunas. So he's going to help from a standpoint of, okay, so now Alex Sarge is not going to have to defend post guys, which right now he's not physically ready to do that. He's going to be able to roll. He's going to let him roam, which as he picks up the nuances, he has the physical tools to do that. But then on offense, I mean, Jonas Valanciunas' best position is in the post. He's expanded his game a little bit to take 1 to 2 3-pointers a game, but that's not what he does. So now, is Alex Sarr at center most effective on offense? But then with his defensive responsibilities, how's that going to work? Again, we talked about he's going to have to explore his offensive game. He's going to kind of have to explore his defensive role as well, right? It's going to be a year of exploration, essentially. I think for me is the biggest takeaway from Summer League.
I agree. Alex Sarr, second overall pick. Interesting to see in just the development that he gets the opportunity to get with the Washington Wizards. Gonna dive into our second one. Listen, for me, at the start of the regular season, based off of Summer League, there's one player that stood out, and that has to be Houston Rockets first round, third pick overall, Reed Shepherd. Just very nice to see him on this stage. Just quickly, what did you think about him?
No, I thought he was phenomenal, to be honest. In a way, I expected him to be fairly effective. I did think he'd find some level of comfort just because his game fits with everybody, and the level of defenders that would really speed him up and really make him uncomfortable, most of those guys don't necessarily play in Summer League. So I thought on offense, like, he would at least find some level of comfort, but he exceeded those expectations to me. I mean, he flat out the best player basically any time he played. And, at his pace, efficient scoring, showed some good playmaking chops, like pretty good playmaking chops. It was basically the draft profile, all the good stuff that made him a third overall pick, being displayed in Summer League without basically any problems. That was quite impressive, and so to me, a little surprising.
Absolutely. Let's throw some stats. All right, in 4 games, we got Reed Shepherd averaged 20 points, 5.3 assists, 4.8 rebounds, 2.8 steals, 1.3 blocks, also shooting 50% from the field. I agree with you 100%. That was my biggest thing. I wanted to know how he was going to look playing against, just because in college you're not going to play against a whole bunch of like NBA guys. I wanted to see how would he handle it versus a steady dose of NBA players, right? That was the first thing that stood out. It almost seems at times that like his body movement, and I put this in my notes, like it almost seems like he's floating out there. I don't know how to explain it. It's almost like he's so unorthodox with his movement that it works, But for me, that was the big thing. And, we talked about the shooting ability. Like, we know that he's very confident in his shot. But I was definitely very interested in seeing what kind of decisions he would make. I saw that the level of decision was really good. Whenever he got a ball screen, he seems to always never really get bumped off his spot and really got to where he wanted to get to on the floor, which I think is very important. I think also it was just, highlighted by the stats, right? Defensively, he was making very like subtle but like high IQ reads defensively, which I found was very interesting because as a smaller player, you almost have to be in position before when the action happens. So you almost sense like for him, he was reading the actions and just making the defensive adjustments. And a lot of his steals that he would do was more like the offensive players almost didn't suspect that he was someone that could potentially get to this spot or want to. But I found that he was really good at reading the game.
No, he was. No, he was. And this leads me to an interesting question because this Houston Rocket team has some serious playoff aspiration. I mean, I don't think there's any question missing the playoffs would be considered a disaster. And quite frankly, I think internally they're expecting to maybe not like win a round for sure, but like let's give ourselves a really, really good shot to win a round. Whether we access the playoffs via the play-in or not, we are gunning to win a round. So now that leads me to the question about how much playing time is there going to be available, because I'll list you 10 guys that I know for a fact going into the year, all these guys are expecting to play a serious role in the rotation. Fred VanVleet, that's 1. Dylan Brooks, that's 2. Steven Adams coming back from injury, that's 3. Jalen Green, that's 4. Jabari Smith Jr., that's 5. Amen Thompson, that's 6. Jeff Green, that's good old vet, that's 7. Jock Landale was backup center last year, that's 8. Deshaun Tate, good combo forward, number 4. And I'd even mention, arguably, definitely their best player, Alperen Şengün. That's 10. So I'm already at 10 players, and I haven't mentioned Reed Shepherd yet. Now, the regular season is long. There are injuries, there are trades, there are suspension, all kinds of things happen. So I do believe he's going to play some games. But which role, how many, is he the best option? If he doesn't play that many games, does he go? Is he okay going down to the G League? How do we still make sure that his development doesn't go by the wayside? It's going to be really, really interesting to see how Houston goes about managing his development this year.
And I agree with you 100%. And you could see that even at Kentucky, right? He kind of had to balance playing off of playing kind of like as an off guard, right? One thing that I learned through this process and just like reading up about Reed is just like wasn't a natural point. Does he have to be in a situation where he has to learn the natural point position? That's another situation, right? Where it's like going back to what you said, like what's the plan going to be? Are you coming as a off-ball combo secondary decision maker, right? But then that means that you have to guard the 6'8", the 6'8" two guards on the other side.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
That's right.
So it almost seems like, and we're gonna finish on this, but it almost seems like the path is going to have to be to follow someone that's in your organization in Fred VanVleet and just kind of like learn as much from him. I don't know what you think about that.
I mean, he's a very good archetype of the type of overall player that Reed could become. I think he has more juice off the bounce than Fred does, so that's an advantage for him. But what Fred has is just like good old savvy vet moves. I mean, Reed is pretty complete. Like, I think you would call him like a mature young player. Like, he's mature for his age. But, I mean, Fred's been through the bumps and grinds for 8 years now. 7 years, sorry. 7 years in the... 8 years. I was right. 8 years in the NBA now. So, he's going to be able to benefit from all that experience. And a big part of it is Fred being able to defend guys that are much bigger, stronger than him. Finding a way, by any way, shape, or necessary. And that has been primordial for his survival in the league and to the status he's accessed. And I think for Reed, like that part, learning from Fred VanVleet specifically, I think that's going to be absolutely invaluable.
Absolutely. We're going to dive into our third player. Josué, this is your moment. This is your guy. I'm giving you the floor. I'm giving you the floor.
You're hyping him up like he's Michael Jordan. That's a little too much. I do like this player, but I think it's fair to evaluate his performance from a comprehensively overall during the multiple summer leagues. And this guy is Stephon Castle. He was drafted 4th overall by the San Antonio Spurs this year. In Las Vegas, a summer league. So he played in 3 different summer leagues. He's playing the Salt Lake City one, the California Classic, and the Las Vegas Summer League. Where unfortunately he sustained an ankle injury and only played 1 game. So I'll just list the stat line from the summer league game because I think it's kind of reflective of his overall performance, even in the other summer league. So he played, well, again, it's 1 game. So he scored 22 points. Along with with 5 rebounds and 4 assists. He shot 8 of 21 from the field, 0 of 6 from 3. He also had 5 turnovers in this game and 1 steal, no blocks. So 8 of 21, that's 38% from the field, and obviously he didn't make a 3 in that game. Sorry, do I have this right? No, sorry. He was 2 for 6. Sorry, 2 for 6 in that game. He was 0 6 in a different one. 2 for 6 in this game. So 33% from 3. So I think with Castle, the idea was, from his standpoint, I want to be a point guard. From the Spurs standpoint, the thought was, well, if he is a point guard, I mean, we have an unbelievable 2-way combo defensively between him at the point of attack and Victor Wembanyama as a 5. I talk about the of base defense. We could literally be all-time, defensive combo 1 and 5. Now, okay, let's go positives. So positive of Castle, all the good stuff that he has translated: his pace, his patience with the ball in his hand, his strengths as a cutter, how he doesn't necessarily rush the attack. He's able to read the initial defender and the screen. His playmaking, without necessarily being elite, leads you to believe that eventually one day there could be more, that he's not just a square, put in a peg square off guard. Like, he could be some combo plus. And then defensively, I mean, this guy's a pest. I mean, it's talk about the guys that they walk in and already is like, okay, he's already beyond the summer league level. Defensively, he's above the summer league level. So those are the positives. The areas of improvement are obviously the jump shot. So they were concerned with his form. Mm-hmm. It's possible. I think this is my opinion. I think his base is good. I think his loaded is average. I think his arm placement is unsure. I think it tinkers. It's not consistent from time to time. And then I think his elbow placement, depending on the defender coming, can be dead-eye perfect or it can be not as perfect. So all things that are, I don't see a hitch. I don't see a lack of confidence. Like, it's fixable. Now, I don't know if it's fixable to become a 40% three-point shooter, but it could be fixable to maybe 33, 34, 35 off the bounce and off the catch. If that's the case, you have an NBA point guard. And if that guy is an NBA point guard, you combine him and Devin Vassell right now in the backcourt, that's a really, really good basis on the way to building a championship team for the San Antonio Spurs. Those are my initial thoughts. What did you think?
Definitely the physicality, right? But what I found very interesting is that the physicality translated in so many different ways, right? I'm looking how he navigates through screens, and I'm like, oh, okay. Like, it's almost like he's guarding the ball, and when the screen is coming, he almost skinnies up the big frame and is able to kind of like, what I look at is when the screen happens, does the player have it in him already that he's trying to pursue the basketball, right? I'm able to see that with him, where I think like he doesn't seem like he's going to be somebody that's going to give up on plays. Now, looking forward, if you have that kind of pairing in ball screen defense, you have Wemby at the back line and you have Stephon Castle funneling, right? I think there's definitely some potential in there. But you hit the nail on the head. The weakness, we're going to call it weakness, right?
Or areas of improvement. Areas of improvement.
Definitely the shooting, but I like that he had the confidence to take them. Me, like, as a coach, I think that's kind of what I look at. I'm looking at how he's approaching every shot. And yes, there was some things that we can work on with the jump shot, but I like that he approached every shot like he was going to make it. And I appreciate that. Can't teach confidence. A lot of times you got to believe, right? And the belief will help create the fact. So I think like that's definitely a good sign for sure.
So, for me, when I think of him, so I think back and I look forward. So there are two things I think of. So looking back, this is a team that had Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili in the backcourt. Obviously, Greg Popovich developed these players from top to bottom, was there throughout their entire career. But they also developed Derek White and DeJounte Murray. So I look at like the combo of all those guys, and I look at how Castle and Devin Vassell could potentially work together, and I see a world where this is very possible without stretching it too much. And I did a little deep dive in Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili's assist statistics just to see like was the style of play reflective in the stats as it was in my mind. And what I found is that basically throughout his career, for Tony Parker, his highest assist per game was 7.7. And if you put this per 36, which is much more, realistic considering the minutes load, and a lot of those guys, both those guys played a lot less minutes as their career went on to preserve their career and extend it. It goes from 7.7 to 6.6. Now, Manu Ginobili, his highest was 4.9 for a season, and if you put it per 36, it's 5.4. So essentially, you're looking at a combined 12 assists a game from year one and year two. And it's important to emphasize that Tony Parker's primary strength was scoring in the paint. Yes, the ball went through Tim. Yes, they had their system. Yes, they evolved into the beautiful game Spurs. But as a player individually, Tony, his best strength was scoring in the paint. It wasn't so much about the Magic Johnson stuff moving forward, the Chris Paul stuff. So, looking back, we know that the Spurs have evolved with a backcourt where there are two good playmakers. One that is a notch above, but the second one is, like, Manu Ginobili can run our offense for multiple possessions, for multiple minutes throughout the game with no problem. Okay, so we've done this in the past. Moving forward, Chris Paul just signed with his team. Could you have a better mentor and a better teacher on the floor, let alone the coaching staff, on the floor to teach a young player how to read ball screens, how to make decisions, what to do to improve your jump shot, especially Chris Paul being a shorter player, smaller player that had to figure out, like, okay, how do I maintain my efficiency going up against big guy? Oh, by the way, Stefan's going against Victor Wembanyama in practice. I think it's pretty good, like, figuring out, okay, how do I shoot over the tallest guy in the league? How do I finish at the rim against the tallest guy? If I didn't do that against him, I'm going to be all right for the rest of the league. So both those aspects, like, are very encouraging from an environment standpoint. It's encouraging that he's in that environment, considering his current areas of improvement.
Oh, I 100% agree. Yeah, let's go into some rapid fire. You ready?
Yep, let's do it.
Yep. Okay, let's go. You go first. Who's your first rapid fire player that we are going to tackle?
So I'm going to start with one that surprised me in a good way. Khalil Ware, drafted 15th by the Miami Heat. I thought he was an exceptional, violent vertical spacer. His rolls to the rim were consistent. They were emphatic. He had multiple poster dunks, one hand, two hands. He even showed a couple like hook shots, stuff that he's done in college. Like, this guy was a high-ranked high school recruit, but to see him this effective, this quickly, for me was a little surprising, and surprising in a way where I as I'm watching the tape, I'm thinking to myself, okay, there's a role for you on the back end of the rotation, like, this year. Like, we can get to January, and, like, you're in the mix as a backup center. Like, depending on the matchups, you can go from 5 to 20, 25 minutes even. Like, there is a possibility of this. So from a Miami Heat standpoint, I think they're really, really encouraged by his performance. And again, the translatability of his role, like, you're supposed to be a vertical spacer in college, that you come to Summer League, you do the same thing at a really high level. All right, let's see it at the next level in the NBA again.
Oh, I like that. Okay, you want to hear mine? My first
Let's go. What you got?
Robert Dillingham. Okay, obviously high profile. Some people may label him as, like, probably one of the best, like, one-on-one scorers in the draft. But we're looking at situation, right? He's going into a situation in Minnesota where he has the opportunity to provide a scoring punch, right? You and I were talking about this. He kind of has a bit more juice that I feel like they lacked last year in the playoffs, right? Now, whether he's going to play in the playoffs, that's one thing to see. You know, we're not going to look ahead. But just right now, in terms of the regular season, he has the opportunity to come in and really provide some solid minutes in times where a lot of the shot creation responsibilities were on Anthony Edwards. Well, now you kind of add someone that now gets the opportunity, and we talked about mentorship, right, with Chris Paul. Well, now you get to get mentored by grit and grind Mike Conley, right? So the hope for Rob Dillingham is that, one, the defensive identity of the Minnesota Timberwolves kind of like bleeds onto him where he can now become a bit more intentional about defense, or it's that there's so much defensive players on this roster that we can cover for some of the mistakes that he does. So for me, that's my first rapid fire.
That's
what do I
great.
hit me? Second one. Let's go.
Second one, I've got, yes, it is. Second one I got was Matas Buzelis, drafted 11th by the Chicago Bulls. It was funny because he wasn't necessarily one of the ones I thought to myself, like going into Summer League, like, oh, you know, I'm excited to see what he does, or I'll pay attention to what he does. But he just kept popping up. Like, even before I dove into a full game, like, he just kept popping up. Like, I'd see a dunk, I'd see a shot creation, I'd see off-ball catch, I'd see transition opportunities. Like, enough that led me to believe, even if you don't run anything for him, he can, like, find a way to give you just enough scoring punch to be a factor. I mean, the Chicago Bulls is a team, I think, in limbo is the fair way to put it, as there's a transition, certainly, from veteran players to young players, and then which one of the young players are we going to keep and build around moving forward. I think he's certainly going to have an opportunity to play a ton. The coaching staff is going to have an opportunity to figure out what are the best ways to maximize his game, because at the same time as the roster is in limbo, like, his game is also a little bit in development. Like, going into last year, going into G League Ignite situation, high school wise he was like a shot creator, and then he got to the G League Ignite level, where some would say the environment, some would say his performance, some would say a combination of both factors. He just wasn't as efficient as a shot creator. So now the question becomes, what is he at this level? Because I think Summer League showed there's a place for him, but then how does it look? Like, what's a good usage rate for him? Is it a third, fourth, fifth option? Is it a 1-2? If so, on how good is your team if that's the case? How good does he become off ball? Is he a complementary player? Like, can he fill in the gaps and, like, help connect with a little more juice, a little more pop? Or do we just give him as many on-ball reps and let's just figure out what we have? So he popped in a way where I was like, okay, let's keep track of what happens here, but not necessarily answering all those questions that you have about him going into the draft. So that's my second one. What's your next one?
Number one overall pick, Zachary Risacher. Disclaimer to the listeners and the fans of just the NBA, of basketball. We are probably not going to hear about Zachary Risacher the same way that we heard about a Wemby or a Zion or a what. It's going to be a draft pick that's going to be interesting to see. But again, development is going to be the biggest factor when it comes to this. Zachary Risacher was, to the latest of my knowledge, right, was drafted to right now see how he could be a fit next to Trae Young, right? So we want to see the secondary decision-making potentially that he can have. But I think there's also a world where the Hawks potentially are like, if the Trae Young experiment doesn't work, maybe Zachary can just come in and just provide a bit more, right? So I think through our conversation, you and I, Josué, we talked about this, and we said, like, there's a world where, like, the Hawks just chose the player that kind of gives them the opportunity to go both ways on, if this guy has the potential to, one, be the cornerstone of our franchise, like, without Trae Young, with or without Trae Young. I think that's kind of like what they were looking at. Listen, he comes in with some professional experience already. So there's already a baseline there that I think is very interesting. But for me, projecting to what I think he can be towards the end of, towards the end of his rookie contract, I think it'll probably be a high-level decision-making wing player that can, like, catch and shoot, that can attack closeouts. And as he puts on a bit more strength, I think physically he'll be able to maybe make a bit more decisions ball handling. Because what I saw during Summer League was that he was getting bumped off a little bit when players were being physical with him, right? So you got to hit that. You got to hit the weights.
Hit the weight room, buddy. Hit the weight room.
You got to hit the weight room. Yeah, so that's my second one. I think for our next two, it'd be interesting to maybe talk about second-year plus players returning and whatnot. So I'm gonna give you the floor. Who's your first?
Yeah, let's do that. That sounds great.
Yeah.
First one for me, second-year NBA player, Julian Strother, drafted 29th by the Denver Nuggets in 2023. It's funny because I was watching a game where I wasn't even watching him, and he kept popping off the screen off the tape to me. I think there were certainly some moments before he got hurt late in the season. And he had performed so well that he was almost at the point to earn Coach Mike Malone's trust for playoff minutes as a rookie, which is like a really, really high bar. But like it was kind of 50-50, maybe not. Well, now Kentavious Caldwell-Pope has left the team. So there's an open spot at the starting two guard to start with. I think Christian Brown starts in pole position for that spot. But then now there's definitely a backup spot open. And I think that's where Julian Strother comes in, right? He shot the ball really well. He made connective reads. His attacks off the second side I thought were exceptional, to be honest. And off the ball, like, you didn't sense that he fell asleep on defense. I don't know that he was, like, an incredible disruptor, but, like, he was there. He was active. Like, there'd be a deflection here. You'd see his hands in the gap. Like, I'm looking at this, and I'm thinking to myself, this guy can contribute in the playoffs next year in that system. And there's going to be opportunity, and he was already kind of good last year. So, okay, let's keep an eye on this. Like this player might be a factor later on in the playoffs. So that's my first one. What's your first one?
So my first one is going to be second-year player drafted in 2023 in the first round, 20th pick, Cam Whitmore. Full disclaimer: I was watching the Houston Rocket game for Reed Shepherd. I wanted to see how he was doing, and Cam was just like, "Nah, you're gonna look at me, buddy." You just you could sense that he took kind of like a leap in his game where first of all, he's a physical specimen at 6'7". He just seemed to consistently put pressure on the rim and get to the paint at will. Afterwards, I would probably say the playmaking really stood out because I saw a couple times Houston, they were letting him run some stuff off the pick and roll and whatnot, right? So I think that was very interesting. And you look at some kind of scoring outbursts. I mean, 20 points in the opener versus LA, 25 points versus Washington. And, he only played 3 games. So I think at a certain point they said, okay, we saw what we needed to see. But listen, very, very encouraging. And, for a player that in 2023 was at a certain point was projected to be in the lottery, then fell out of the lottery. Listen, I'm good for a good sob story, So for me, I'm very very with him being able to just showcase that he still has a lot to give. So to me, that was encouraging. So you want to give me your second one?
I do, but I'll also mention that he wasn't one of the guys I mentioned in my list of Rockets rotation players ahead of Reed Shepherd. So he'd be 11th on top of it. And by the way, I didn't mention Terry Eason too, so that'd be 12th. And then Reed would be 13th. So there are so many NBA players, valuable, contributing some kind NBA players on that team. Fascinating to watch how their season evolves.
Oh my God!
I'll just mention that.
No.
So my next one, my second-year player again, Gigi Jackson, for drafted 45th overall in 2023 by the Memphis Grizzlies. I think what I do need to mention is that I'm not gonna say impressed, but surprised me by the level of efficiency for a guy who is a self-proclaimed, and I think it's evident this guy is a shot creator and a scorer. Usually, for those guys in a summer league environment, you'd like to see, okay, how many shot attempts was he able to create in a way that in the shot creation in a way that is translatable to an NBA game. So how many of those shot attempts look like the process and the result are translatable in that role to an NBA game? And for him, it was like quite a bit of them. And I'll just mention his stat line real quick. So he scored. That was because he played so many. Another one who played across multiple classics. So in the summer league, in the Vegas summer league, he averaged 22 points in 6 games, 22 points, 8.5 rebounds and 2.2 assists with 2 turnovers. So that speaks to the improvement needed in his playmaking. But then from a scoring standpoint, and I think that's a role he's going to have in the Memphis rotation next year. Come off the bench. Here's the ball. Hey, go get us a bucket. I think there's a world where he can do it, not just at a good regular season level, but good enough for them in a playoff setting. And I think that will be the goal from their standpoint. Now, it's a deep team. They have a lot of options, a lot of places where they can go. But I think they're going to give him every opportunity for him to explore that role, grow into that role, and see if he can become a contributor to a level that pushes them further and further up the Western Conference standings and playoff race.
Absolutely. You're looking at all these prospects that we talked about. The NBA is at a pretty good place, and there's so much more that we can definitely talk about. We're going to just talk about, we have a couple of honorable mentions that we have to.
Oh, you didn't mention your last second year guy. You had one. You had one more. You got to show love to.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. I apologize.
So many good players, okay. and then you're
so many good players. I'm skipping.
Cut the grass on the feet of one of them.
I'm skipping. Oh man. All right, Josh Christopher. Okay, when you're looking at someone that I got the chance to just see grow, right? Like I think the first time I saw Josh Christopher was where he played for Mayfair in high school. Afterwards, it was Vegas Elite. Where he teamed up with Jalen Green and Jaden Hardy, right? Afterwards, went to Arizona State, and then now just bouncing in a couple of situations. But now getting into a situation with the Miami Heat that I think kind of rejuvenated a bit because the struggle with a lot of these players is that they go through situations where they're used to being the guy, and then you got to refine yourself. And if you don't land in the right situation, I think that becomes like something that's very challenging. I'm going to just quote something that Josh Christopher said. Josh Christopher was drafted in 2021, right? So in the first round, he was 21st overall. He said, I think that Heat culture brought the best out of me, which I found was very interesting. A lot of times like kids need that structure, right?
And it's been one summer he's already drinking the Kool-Aid, eh, mama?
That's what I'm saying. So, averages 19.3 points, 3.0 rebounds, 1.8 assists, 2 steals in 6 games. He ended up winning Summer League's Finals MVP, which I found was very interesting, and scored 24 points in that final with 6 3-pointers. Right, we love somebody that could shoot the 3. But yeah, after that, just being able to see that the Heat rewarding him for his play and signing him to that 2-way contract, I think was like, cherry on top for that situation. So I think, again, going back to what you say, we have so many players in this league. There's so many different situations and stuff, but there's so many to talk about, right? So I think what we're gonna do is just to end this, we're gonna talk about our honorable mentions, what we have. You want to go first, or should I go first?
How about you start?
Okay, I'll start. First honorable mention from Lake Show, Dalton Connect, I think was very interesting for me to keep up with. Drafted in the first round, 17th overall pick by the Lakers. We knew why the Lakers chose Dalton Connect. We knew that he was someone that could provide some kind of scoring punch. We know that he could make shots. But I think what was very interesting for me to see was that he made a lot of decisions with the basketball in his hand, right? So it seemed like he was able to show some kind of versatility to his game, right? So, it'll be interesting to just be able to see, like, especially in the Summer League, I think, like, he made the right play. He made the right play for the most part. So, what about you? for honorable mention?
First one for me, Bob Carrington, drafted 14th by the Wizards this year. I wish I watched more tape. I watched just enough to give him an honorable mention, but like I have in the back of my mind, like, okay, if I go back and rewatch all his summer league tape, or I'm gonna be a big Washington Wizards fan right around the March part when all the rookies play after the trade deadline, because I think this guy has a lot of juice off the bounce. I think his decision making is actually not bad, even on the ball, like as a primary ball handler. And it's just about like how does he round his game? How does he become an effective player when he doesn't have the ball in his hand? Because I'm not sure that he's a on-ball decision maker at the next level. I think he can do it in a good role, like for a good amount of possession, a fairly decent usage rate. I don't know about first, second, third option from that standpoint, but he is very interesting, and I'm keen to keep up with his development. What's your second honorable mention?
Absolutely. Honorable mention. We're going to go Jared McCain. Jared McCain, drafted by the Philadelphia 76ers, 16th overall. I like, we knew that there's somebody that could shoot the ball, right? The shooting ability translates. Was able to impose his physicality on certain matchups, right? What I found interesting with Jared McCain is that Jared McCain's, like, his lower body is so strong. Like, he's able to bump players off. He doesn't seem like players are able to just get him off course, right? He's a player that, like, if he wants to use the ball screen, he's able to use his body pretty well to be able to get to certain spots on the floor, right? And obviously, like, the shooting opens up the game. That's a whole other aspect to what it comes. But be interesting to see how much time he spends in the G League, or if he does, right? Is there opportunities potentially with the Philadelphia 76ers? That'll be an interesting one to definitely keep up. But for me, I think a lot of people will have to definitely look at his game, because this guy could hoop. He doesn't just do TikToks. He could hoop. So definitely one that I think will be interesting for him to see. Number 2 for you?
I mean, we got to go Canada, right? Zach Edey, 9th overall, drafted by the Memphis Grizzlies. He only played one game in the Salt Lake City Summer League, but it was fairly impressive. 14 points, 15 rebounds, and everything that he was doing in college, he was doing it in a Summer League environment against Walker Kessler, who's an NBA player, third-year NBA player who's played at the World Cup for Team USA. Like, he was on the roster, and he made him look small. The fact he made a 6'10" guy look small, it was jarring, quite frankly. And I'm somebody who does believe he can have an impact, especially at the offensive end from an offensive rebounding standpoint. But that one game led me to believe, like, no, he might, like, absolutely mash on the offensive rebound standpoint, like, maybe even better than what Steven Adams was giving the Grizzlies, let alone his vertical spacing, let alone him being an alley-oop threat, let alone his drop defense. So, honorable mention to him. I'm sure the Grizzlies staff is really excited and are counting on him to have a big role in their rotation. Your third play.
I'm going to go... I got to pick another Sixers guy that I found was very interesting. Just because he provides a different dimension, I think, to the game, which I miss, high motor bigs, 6'9", 245. Adam Bona, second round pick, 41st overall, to the Philadelphia 76ers. That's someone else that I think, with the proper development and the proper situation, can be, like, very interesting. Me, when I analyze bigs, the one thing that kind of stands out, I love to see how they run the floor, and it seems like his gait, like, he's one of those, like, he runs the floor, like, he could get up and down the court, like, super quickly, which I think is super valuable, especially in today's game, with an NBA that's very perimeter oriented. How quickly your big is able to go from one side of the court, from transition from defense to offense, is, like, very important. And again, I saw him be physical. I saw him, again, for me, my biggest thing is just that he never stopped, right? So I always have an appreciation for high motor guys because, I'm biased. I was a high motor guy myself, right? So when I played. So just being able to provide that kind of value to a team, I think can be something very interesting. So, yeah. What about your last one?
My last one, I see your Adam Bona, and I raise you an Ulrich Chomche. because I think Urish is the fastest big end-to-end that I saw in Summer League. In fact, I think he was sometimes running so fast he would run past the basket. That's how fast and focused he was on changing end-to-end. He's a really interesting case study as the first NBA player drafted right out of the NBA Academy, in this case NBA Academy Africa. My God, sometimes twisted. French guy here, sorry guys. So he's obviously, because we've never seen that before, so he's a really interesting case study to follow. His commitment to defense, evident. His learning curve, interesting, like how fast he was picking up some of the stuff from a defensive, offensive concept standpoint. There is enough here that leads me to believe this is a good project, without question. It's just the patience is going to be absolutely mandatory. No rushing, making sure he is picking up and checking off items off the checklist one by one, and giving him as many reps and as many opportunities in competitive environment as possible. But there's something there, no question. There is something there. Let's see how his development grows and evolves over time.
Absolutely. Oh, we did a round of Summer League. Anything on your mind? Anything else that you wanted to throw in there? Because I think we covered a lot.
20th anniversary of Summer League already. 20 years of this exercise now, and it's evolved into like his own almost event. Like I call it Effectures with affection, the basketball Comic-Con of the NBA, because that's what it is. From not just from a game standpoint, but the event itself in terms of who it attracts and the networking opportunities. So it's always good to be at Summer League, watch Summer League, be around Summer League without question.
Absolutely. Josué Sédrjo, thank you. We'll be keeping up during the season to see how some of these prospects are operating. So always a pleasure, my friend. Looking forward to doing this a little bit later when we're revisiting what some of these prospects are doing and how we're keeping up with them.